Welcome to PPR podcast number 110, presented by the San Diego Strike Force. As always, I'm Chase Izidoro, and I'm joined by Bowe Fertig. Bowe, 11 days away from the first kickoff of Friday Night Football, man. How excited are you?
Excited, man. Excited. Now, this is going to be a great season, 25th year in the making for the granddaddy of them all, the Prep Pigskin Report. It's going to be an exciting year, a lot of great news, a lot of great things happening this year as we continue to add new segments and new ways of broadcasting games.
Yeah, after doing all these team previews these last couple weeks, going to practices, once you start hearing guys actually hit each other with pads on, It's like, okay, I need some football in my life. So I'm so excited.
Well, you've been doing team previews as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So going out to the teams in the flesh, how's that been for you?
You know, it's kind of eye-opening. Sometimes first of all, I always notice these guys with their helmets on and their jerseys.
Right.
So then once I actually interview them, I'm like, there's no way that's you. You know, so it's just good to see their faces, and it's very refreshing.
Right.
But it's also kind of interesting to see how they've grown, because they are still young men. So every year they look better, they grow better, and it's been so awesome to like almost get that insider knowledge of like, okay, these guys are going to be kind of the big Showtime guys this year.
Right.
But I think we should get into some league previews today.
Okay.
Start breaking down how you think and how I think these leagues will play out. Obviously, being the king of the South Bay, how do you see some of the South Bay leagues going?
Yeah, well, the South Bay leagues went from 2 leagues to 3 leagues, back to 2, back to 3. So now we're at 3 leagues. I appreciate it more just because of the competitiveness. It's more competitive from top to bottom. We'll start with the Metro Pacific. Last year's winner, Chula Vista, winning their first league title since 2008. Coach Bannister is back there, and he feels this is their best offense, balanced-wise, as he's heading into his 8th year as head coach. They were 7-5 last year. They swept the league, going 4-0, and it really starts with their quarterback, Isaac Baca. As a sophomore last year, 1,000 throwing yards and 10 touchdowns, along with averaging 8 yards on the ground. So he can use his legs and his arm. He's a dual-threat quarterback. And running back Paul Alvarez. He led the running backs last year with 119 rushes for 841 yards. He had a 7-yard per carry clip, which is nice as a back. So now he's a senior. He's going to be stronger this year. Both of those guys are set to have big years. And Baca's top receiver is going to be Elijah Gillespie, a junior last year, led all guys with 32 catches for 411 yards. He's a tall, lengthy receiver on the outside. Baca is going to be utilizing him as a downfield threat a lot. And they have some notable returners as well. Other than those 3 guys, they have the defensive end who was the defensive player of the year for the Metro Pacific. That is Frankie Almeida, led the team with 75 tackles, 6 sacks. And then some other notable returners. They have 3-year captain Nathan Hauk, and bring back some beef up front with 6'6", 330-pound Santiago Macias. He's a senior captain this year. The offseason was a bit brutal for the Spartans, graduating 25 seniors, but the JV last year went undefeated. And they fared well in the Southwestern Passing Tournament, going 5-1 overall. Losing to Mater Dei in the semis, which we know is a pretty darn good team in the South Bay. So the offseason was good, and they're returning a lot of key players for Chula Vista. So a bright future ahead for Coach Bannister in his 8th year. And then we go to Southwest. This is a team who I think is going to exceed expectations. They were 4-6 last year. They went 4-2 pre-league and then went 0-4 in league play. Injuries and I think grades hurt them a bit on the back end. So this is a team where I see them exceeding their 4-win total. Their strength is they have a lot of guys returning. Some captains to mention, 2 juniors, Nadi Gomez and Matthew Martinez, and 2 seniors, David Hardy and Isaac Tapia, are some guys that are going to be leading this Raider program. And some key returners on the offensive side, senior quarterback Justice Pidgey, Andrew Moreno is a senior dual guy receiver, defensive back, and a couple 2-way guys, Deshaun Robinson and Jalen Garcia up front. Angel Mercado is going to lead the way for the Raiders. And this has been the most active for Coach Dominic Cruz. He is now in his 5th season. He was a player back in the early 2000s with Marian Catholic, we know now as Mater Dei Catholic. Won a championship with them in San Diego, a team with P.T. Gates, as a lot of people know. So he has a championship mentality, knows how to win games. And this is a guy that has gotten better every year as a coach, and he brings in 6 new coaches, including offensive coordinator Clay Johnston and defensive coordinator Esteban Murillo. Those two teams I mentioned, Southwest and Chula Vista, but now the most exciting, electrifying player, the most naturally gifted player in this league, the Metro Pacific, is athlete wide receiver Elijah Clark. Led the county with 26 yards per reception, racking up 36 catches for 951 yards and a dozen touchdowns. Both of those numbers were top 10 in the county. That was with quarterback Alex Woschek. Woschek is no longer there. He was the heart and soul of this team last year. Not only that, but he had over 41 touchdowns as well. So you lose a guy that was probably the most naturally gifted player in all of Mar Vista history, and now they're going to have a new quarterback. And we don't know who that is just yet. We know Clark has the talent, but who's going to get the ball to him? One of the reasons Clark had a lot of opportunities last year was because their defense gave up a lot of points, unfortunately. And this year, we'll see how that works out, but Clark should have a lot of opportunities for Mar Vista. They were second in league last year. They're going to be around that mark this year as well. And then over to San Isidro, Keith Agwan returns for his 6th year as head coach. They were 3-7 last year, 1-3 in league play. Some starters on defense returning, including 6 seniors. But the most notable player over the offseason is kicker Jose Queros. He had a solid offseason, placing 2nd at the SDSU camp, and some other starters. It starts up front with center Osmar Jaime. The defensive captain is junior Jaden Dominguez, who had 85 tackles last year. Senior Omar Vargas is also a 3-year starter, wide receiver, cornerback combo. And some sophomores are going to need to step up here this year. That's going to be Dario Garcia and Nathan Lintag, according to Coach Coach Agwan, excuse me. And that's because they lost a couple really key players over the offseason. And we're rounding it out with Castle Park. They were 4-7 overall last year, 2-2 in league play. And Coach Silva is still there, one of my favorite coaches in the South Bay. Epitome of a player's coach. He's been coaching in the South Bay for over a decade now, a lot at Southwestern and now at Castle Park. Just a good-hearted person and loves to highlight the running game. So any backfield out there, he's going to highlight those key players. He knows the game really well. And it really starts with time of possession, playing good defense, and winning the turnover battle. Coach Paco Silva has been that coach for a long time. And I know a couple of teams that run the ball really well out of the Grossmont Hills League, and I believe that's a league you're going to be previewing right now, Chase.
Yes, so first on the Metro Pacific, when I look at that league, it really is Chula Vista because they caught my eye so late last year with the stretch that they went on where they just looked kind of unstoppable. It's so good to hear that so many of those guys are going to be returning so that we can see them over a full season and what they can accomplish. Looking forward to the Spartans, and it sounds even better with their JV going undefeated. Yeah. You'd like to hear that a program like that can build something that is sustainable. So really looking forward to that. But if we're talking about the Grossmont Hills League, because I'm going to cover the North, the City, and the East since you are doing all the South Bay, I might as well touch on all the bases. It really comes down to a heavyweight battle. That's between Granite Hills and Helix. No disrespect to all the other teams in that league. But really, Granite Hills, we talk about guys returning like Chula Vista. Granite Hills is returning a very large number of guys from that state title winning team. Now, the biggest question mark is going to be quarterback because the most impressive thing they were to do last year was to put in Tomasello and Parlon and never miss a beat no matter who they threw in there. They have Zach Benitez now this year. I saw him at 7-on-7 a little bit. It's going to help him a lot that he has guys like Xander. He has guys like Maxwell Turner and Isaiah Jackson in the backfield. He's got a lot of guys on that offense who are very experienced and were on that title-winning team. We'll see how he plays on Friday nights. He looked all right. I think he'll do just fine. But that will be the key contributor to where this team goes this year, and can they turn themselves into a powerhouse, which they're really set up to do because they are so young still. Obviously we talk about guys, Demarion White, Travis Ford coming from Helix. Their defense is stacked. We talk about Nikoi Maddox. They're still returning so many of those guys. Granite Hills is still going to be a dominant team. On the other side, we were all big on Helix last year because they were phenomenal. I think Rylan Jesse has a chance to be on the podium at the end of this year because of the weapons that are around him and because of the strides I think he's taking this season. We talk about guys like Kevin Allen in the backfield. Jackson Daniels is a great wide receiver, but what we saw was Quincy Heron last year kind of being the big body in the red zone. This kid, Kaiza Matovu, which I apologize if I'm saying that wrong because I heard him say it once. He is a great target for Rylan Jesse when he gets into the red zone. I saw it in the 7-on-7 games. He has all the weapons possible to have a career year to send him out before he goes to Utah State next season. I don't know how those are going to play against each other because we saw the quadruple overtime game last year. So it really is
the best game of the year.
Oh, without a doubt. It really is that fine of a margin when you talk about these two teams. So will the quarterback being new at Granite Hills kind of change everything and make it so that Helix now has the advantage? I don't know. I'm not sure. But I think these two teams you're going to be splitting hairs, and I cannot wait for when they match up against each other. It's really going to be a huge heavyweight fight.
And a lot of people would say that game catapulted Granite Hills to that championship run. And it didn't do that for Helix.
Yeah,
they lost that
them.
game. Yeah. And the momentum, one way or the other, and it proved vital to both of those programs last season.
Yeah, it's going to be incredible, a battle between those two. And it's so great that we also get it at the Division I level. It's not just going to be for the league as well.
Yeah.
But I believe you're going to touch on the Metro South Bay now.
Yeah, and that league also added a couple teams as well. Santana and West Hills coming from the Grossmont Valley now to the Grossmont Hills League. So it should add a little bit more depth to that league, which is going to be good. Now over to the Metro South Bay. Montgomery, we talk about clear-cut winners last year, and Montgomery dominated the Metro South Bay. They went 8-3 overall, 3-0 in league play, similar to Chula Vista. But I would say Montgomery is more of the heavy favorite in this league. And they opened the season on the road at Coronado, so that could be a very possible Week 1 South Bay Game of the Week, both those programs going into the quarters last year. And it really starts up front, or at the head, in the administration office with head coach Freddie Dunkel and offensive coordinator DeMarco Sampson, two South Bay guys. We talked about Castle Park. Those two guys came from Castle Park. They know the South Bay very well. They came in 2018 at Montgomery, a program that just hadn't been on the map for the first 2 decades of the 2000s. They started 5-5 and have beat that mark every year after that. And then 3 of those 4 seasons with 8 and 9 win seasons, winning league. So they have really elevated this program. But there's a tight quarterback competition chase in camp. And to talk about that, sophomore Andy DeAnda is explosive. He's the 3rd fastest guy on the team, so he can make plays with his legs. And offensive coordinator DeMarco Sampson, as most offensive coordinators do, love the dual threat quarterback, and DeAnda supplies that for this offense. And then you have more of a throwing quarterback, Diego Villanueva, who had the experience last year, played a few games and started a game or 2 as well. So it's the balance of both, and we know Coach Sampson has used dual quarterbacks like Granite Hills did last year. And it's Eric Brown on the outside. He took 2nd in the conference last year in the 100 meters, 11 flat. That's a pretty fast guy. Coach Sampson said he's no doubt the fastest player in the league, so we'll definitely be keeping an eye out on him. Offensively, across the board, they're faster. Eric Brown helps that on the outside, but it's the size in the middle. Mike Moore, tight end, and big 6'7" wide receiver Jaden Cannon supplying a lot of size on the outside. We know Montgomery loves to pound the rock. They were a big time of possession team, and a lot of teams actually brought 8 in the box where they were leaving 0 over the top, meaning no safety. A lot of one-on-one opportunities. Moore and Cannon are going to flourish in this offense downfield. And we talked about great JV teams. 2 years ago, Montgomery's JV team 9-0-1. Last year, 9-1. So they've been playing exceptionally well over the past seasons at the varsity level. Now their JV combined with that, they're set up to at least match that 8-win mark from last season. The second place team, Hilltop, went 5-6, 2-1 in league play. Hilltop alum and ex-Charger kicker Brian Wagner returns for his 3rd season. He's improved this program every year since Wagner has been there. They did lose a lot of key seniors last year, so it'll be interesting to see who fills in for Hilltop. Olympian has a first-year head coach, Brad Burton, but they're a senior-heavy team. A few seniors to mention are 3 senior captains, linebacker Ethan Malone and CJ Clavier, who had 73 tackles last season. On the offensive side, Jake Marcial, 22 receptions, averaged 22 yards per catch 487 yards on the season, at half dozen receiving touchdowns. They had a competitive summer, going 6-1 overall in the passing tournament, and won the consolation bracket. So positive notes for a team that has a first-year head coach. As we know, it's very difficult to rally a group of coaches. And then ending the Metro South Bay is Sioux High, Sweetwater, fourth-year head coach Irvin Hernandez. We talked about Coach Paco Silva as being a great coach, a great advocate for the South Bay, and Coach Irvin Hernandez is one of those guys in the South Bay who I always enjoy catching up with. And the good news for Sweetwater, they dropped to Division 5. They've just been struggling the past few years. So be more competitive for them as they drop into Division 5.
My team that I look for in the South Bay is Montgomery. Like we said with Chula Vista as well. Having that undefeated JV team gives you that luxury of kind of having some stability as you go into this new year. When you did lose some key players from last season, Montgomery was a great team. They could take anybody down to the wire because they played you short and they run the ball.
Yeah.
I'd love to see how that changes or how that stays the same this year. I'm very interested in the Montgomery team. I think they have another great team coming down the pipeline this year.
Yeah.
But now, as we move on to the league that I've always known as home, the Western League, this league is so stacked top to bottom. It's honestly going to be incredible to watch these teams play against each other. I think I'll move back to the front. So to start off, UC, and I have to make some apologies for University City. I got the wrong information last week.
We got the wrong information.
We heard that Quentin DeMar had transferred. That is not the case. He will still be the starting quarterback at UC.
Which is good news for them.
Which is great for them because I think he's a great quarterback on the rise in this county. I just think that this league might be a bit too much for them. You know, well, the good thing for them will be going against these teams. It'll shape them up come playoff time because I do still think UC will be a good team in the playoffs. I just don't know if they can go toe-to-toe with some...
What a tough time to be in the Western League right
I mean,
now.
it's really one of the toughest leagues because you look at probably St. Augustine. You know, we knew going into it what it was going to be for them to have to play with freshmen last year. Now those guys look like they've taken certain strides, but is it enough to compete with the likes of Cathedral, Madison, and Lincoln? I'm not sure. That's something that we're going to find out every Friday night. But I really do like what I've seen from guys like Bronx Latuli Gassanoa, Parker Patterson going into his senior year, but it's really Parker Johnson and Brady Palmer, who they kind of look like the cornerstones coming in last year as freshmen that they were going to build around. Actually, Brady Palmer will be joining us for the PPR podcast tomorrow with Paul and Burt.
Nice.
But I've seen the improvements from him, and I've seen the improvements on both sides of the ball from Johnson. I don't know what heights they can reach this year, but I know they're going to be reaching certain heights that were bigger than last year. It will be interesting to see if they can take some wins off of maybe Cathedral or maybe a Madison or a Lincoln, if they can surprise those teams. Because when I look at Cathedral, the defense of this Dons is back. Is it back to the state title winning team? I'm not sure. But this secondary is really, really good. I cannot say it enough. This kid, Joshua Spencer, that they got from Patrick Henry, is phenomenal on the outside. I saw him have like 5 or 6 pass breakups in one 7-on-7 game. He's an isolated cornerback who's not afraid to go to man-to-man. I love that whenever we get to see it. We see it all the time with Lincoln, like across the board. So it's good to always see that from a young kid. But really, it comes down to Ty Cortez in that defensive secondary, a guy leading from the back who just takes command of the field when he's out there. This Don's defense can push them to new heights, especially because I think the offensive side of the ball is going to be far improved than it was last year. Jack Stevens seems to make some certain strides. He looks more comfortable out there. Anthony Taylor, there'll be another Don's player we'll touch on in a little bit. But Ethan Ford at the running back, I think he's a very good running back, and he's been like that for the last couple of years. Now he's getting his chance because Will Bond is no longer there. This Don's team could be a surprising team yet again, but that's only because Madison and Lincoln seem like the two giants in this league. Lincoln, as we know, they lost a lot of the players, but they retooled and reloaded. They look the same as ever. And Achilles Smith Jr. is a phenomenal young quarterback. I want to know, can they hit the ground running in time for league play? They'll polish themselves in time for league play. That's for certain. They'll be ready to go once league play starts. But I think Madison might be going into it with the most momentum because they are returning so many guys. Almost similar to the Granite Hill situation where they did lose their quarterback, so that's really the big question mark, and that could derail you or maybe be an improvement. So we'll see how Parental plays there But the defensive side of the ball, in my opinion, this will be the best defense in San Diego will be Madison this year. T-Val, Titus Toilolo at linebacker are phenomenal. Mekhi Villavia looks like he's slimmed down a little bit, and he's a little bit more agile from the defensive line, which I love that from him because he's still big and he's still fast and has great movement off the line. But Jaylen Brown in the secondary with Martell Hughes, this Madison defense is going to be a problem for whoever goes up against them. And I cannot wait for Western League play because so many of these teams, there's so many question marks as to, okay, who's going to dominate over the other, who will come out on top. I still have no idea. If I have to go into it, looking into it, I probably say Madison might be the favorite, simply on the defensive side alone. But after a couple of weeks of watching Lincoln, that could very well change.
Yeah, right.
Could very well change.
I'm like defending state champ.
I just think Madison right now has so much chemistry because these guys have been together for a long, long time. That's something that Lincoln can pick up very quickly because they're so talented. But I think going into it, if someone had the head start, it's Madison. And I think at the end of the day, Madison's defense might end up being the best in San Diego.
When we look at first-team defenses, it's going to be filled with Western League guys, filled with Madison, Lincoln, and Cathedral guys. Yeah. So that is a definite. Two guys that you mentioned on earlier, Brady Palmer and Parker Johnson. On the road, the first week of playoffs, go to Eastlake, not an easy place to win. And those two guys, Palmer and Johnson, had exceptional games. I think Johnson scored the game-winning touchdown and clinched the game with an interception as freshmen. So those two guys, after a big win like that in playoffs, is definitely going to prove vital here in their sophomore years.
Absolutely, and really kind of the shining moment to then leapfrog them going into this second season.
Yeah.
Like I said, though, it's still question marks because they are still young at the end of the day. It's not like, oh, now they're seniors. So they're still growing, but I like what I'm seeing from Saints, and I like what they're building over there at Saints, but it's still in the Western League, so it's going to be tough either way they go.
Well, it's definitely going to prepare them for a D1 run.
Absolutely.
Once again.
So now we move on to the Metro Mesa League, Bo.
Yeah, and you talk about two teams, Eastlake and Mater Dei. The Titans were, first 2 decades of the 2000s, it was Titan dominance, right? And even against Mater Dei from 2005 to 2021, they won 9 out of the 10 games through that stretch. Mater Dei has flipped the script a bit, winning their last 2 during their back-to-back state championship runs. So it's Mater Dei's league to lose at this point. And you talk about Purvis at quarterback. We've talked about McMillan behind in the backfield. And Isaiah Buxton. I mean, these are big-time Power 5 names in a South Bay program. And then over at Eastlake, there's really one guy that stands out to me, and he was a key contributor and the most improved and valuable player at Eastlake, and that was Fabian Gerbella. Had no idea that he was going to be playing quarterback last year. Injuries, grades, a few things had happened, stepped in and improved week in and week out, and was also their starting middle linebacker. That's probably the most difficult way to go about it. Maybe linebacker, running back, because different type of hits, but when you're a quarterback that uses his legs, reminded me a couple times of running down the sideline like a Colin Kaepernick. Really lengthy, had good strides to him. Had 125 tackles at a middle linebacker, so he gets his nose dirty, and as starting quarterback, you want him healthy. So that's going to be a name that a lot of people are going to be recognizing in the South Bay. It's going to be a race down to those two guys or those two teams, and it's going to come down to October 20th. The second to last week of the season, Eastlake and Mater Dei is going to define the Metro Mesa League champion. Otay Ranch, Brad Burton comes back as a second-year head coach. He brings in his twin brother, Mitch, which is nice to see. Mitch will now be the offensive coordinator, taking over longtime offensive coordinator Judd Raychow, who was my offensive coordinator at Chula Vista High School. He's been in the South Bay. Judd Raychow has for more than 2 decades, was a great man, a great father, raised his kid, coached his kid at Otay Ranch, who's now at University Davis. And just an overall really good guy on and off the field. Was a pleasure being coached by him, and I know the South Bay is going to miss him at Otay Ranch. And rounding it off for the Metro Mesa is Bonita Vista. Had a tough year last year, going 3-7, 1-2 in league play. But they will be returning running backs and linebacking core. That is their strength. The returning starters in both roles with other players that will be going and playing for a time. Returning running back Caden Ada Tannehill led the Barons with 85 carries for 395 yards. Linemen Sebastian Flores and Diego Bustamante will look to man the trenches with linebackers Nate Sandoval and Landon Wells. The top newcomer in camp is Nick Edwards to add some size up front. That's a name that has been coming out of this camp through the Barons program. And Bonita Vista will also have 4-year starter Jaden Peterson and 3-year starter Kelly Brown to rely on. They also have a quarterback competition in camp between 3 guys. Senior Antonio DiStefano was the immediate backup and started last year, but he's recovering from off-season injury, which leaves the door open for junior transfer Isaiah Luna and senior newcomer David Lancard. So interesting competition in camp for the Barons at quarterback. Coaching staff has been together, some positives for 5+ years, and their JV had a solid season last year, going 6-3. So some good things happening, but the excitement, I should say, surrounding the Bonita Vista program, they are heading to Hawaii week 2 to play Kalani High School. The Barons will be in Honolulu, a great itinerary ahead of them. Pearl Harbor, the Dole Plantation, checking out North Shore and a luau. So I know Coach Arciaga in his 4th season is really looking forward to that for his kids. Just a great experience, a great opportunity to mingle with kids and see another part of the country and kids from another part of the country. Were you ever able to experience traveling out of town?
Yeah, so we went to play Vista Murrieta, and we got the brakes beaten off of us.
Yeah.
For a very good Cathedral team, but when we went and played Vista Murrieta, that was the team that had Su'a Cravens, who did it on both sides of the ball. And, you know, it was fun. It is a great experience to take that travel and travel that far. I will say this, going from Cathedral to Eastlake felt like an out-of-town experience from that far. But no, the only time I really went out was Vista Murrieta. And it's just so cool because you're going against another top team as well. So the hype on the bus ride alone just feels different. I can't imagine what the hype on the plane ride must feel like as well, especially if you're going to Hawaii.
Exactly.
You know, at the end of the day, you know, obviously you want to have a great performance on the field, but it's a win either way. Well, also I believe Lincoln is opening up in Hawaii as well, which will be just so awesome for that school, especially because they are state winning champs, which should draw some attention when they go play in Hawaii. But if we're looking at the Metro Mesa, it's going to come down to Mater Dei and Eastlake, like we've said. You know, I want to see what improvements Eastlake can make this year because they need to get back to the program that they were. Same thing for Mater Dei, though. So many question marks because we've had so much familiarity with them over these last couple of years with the same players and same coaching staff. Now that all kind of changes, but they still have a lot of talent on that team. I like what I see from Cartel Purvis. Obviously, Anthony McMillan is a phenomenal running back. I can't wait to see what they look like this year. That's really one of the more intriguing storylines. But as we move now to another league that is completely up for grabs, in my opinion, you know, we look at the Avocado League, somewhat in like the Western League, where obviously the big team coming in is Lincoln, just like the big team coming in is Carlsbad. But so many of these other teams have something to say about that. I am still on the El Camino train. They are phenomenal. They're returning a lot of their players. I'm buying big into Carson Howard and Devin Serta. I think they're a great 1-2 punch with their quarterback and running game. But they also, as always, they have the big guys on the line. Api Saloma, Tina Samoa, if I'm saying that correctly.
That sounds right.
Quentin Johnson is phenomenal on the D-line as well. Having those big guys in the trenches, like we saw them do last year, puts them in every game. It makes it so, you know, they're playing to a one-score game. And so they put themselves in a chance to win every ball game that they're in. I like what El Camino can do. We saw how far they could get, losing in the semifinals to Mission Hills in the D1 semifinals. It could be a big year for the Wildcats. But then we look at some of the other teams. La Costa Canyon looks on the rise. Every time I see them, they look like they have more weapons. One kid that really stood out was Paco Martinez. Looked phenomenal playing wide receiver in 7-on-7. As always, though, the big kid, Trevor Ladd. They are going to lean on him every chance that they get. He's basically San Diego's Travis Kelce, man.
Yeah.
He's a beast. He's great at catching the ball. He's a big body guy, not afraid of contact. I cannot wait to see what Trevor Ladd does this season. I think it's going to be a massive season for him. Really a quarterback competition for them as well between Roth and Splavik. I don't know what situation they're going to go. They both look great in 7-on-7. Might be a king of the hill situation where whoever punts is coming off the field, and whoever scores stays on the field.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind it because I think they're both great, but it should be interesting to see from La Costa Canyon. The big question marks, I guess, in the league are Poway and Torrey Pines. Saw Poway go to the Open. It kind of looked out of their depth at times. I guess it's because it's more well-rounded teams, but we know what Poway can do to everybody on a week-to-week basis. They can run the ball, and they do it well. I want to see what life looks like for them without Connor Rath, because they'll still have a great running game, as they always do. But maybe they start integrating some more passing plays. They start getting more well-rounded and building themselves up for a playoff situation. The other one is Torrey Pines. I liked what they did going with Robbie Collins. I liked what he's now building there. And I liked what I'm seeing from certain guys like Jake Sweeney at running back. I thought he looked phenomenal when I went to go to the team preview. I think he'll be a big player. Do I think they have enough to compete in the Avocado League with everybody else? Maybe not. They might be more competitive this year, which I think is where they're trying to get to. So maybe we see them steal some wins from some of these teams. And, that's really what they have to be. It's just grind it out and get themselves ready for the playoffs, which they might turn into a team that, might surprise some people. But really, we got to look at Mission Hills, another team who has quarterback competition between Troy Hune and Keaton Smith. Might be another King of the Hill situation. They both look phenomenal.
We're going to catch them Saturday night.
Yeah, they look phenomenal. And that will be a great first week game against Granite Hills. Can't wait for that. One of the most underrated wide receivers they have is Jaden Williams. He looks great on the outside. Mission Hills, as always, is ready to come to the party and ready to show that they're good enough to get into the Open Division. Carlsbad, though, just loaded with talent. And this is now the senior season for Julian Sane. And, they've gone to the Open Division Championship year after year, haven't won it. Seems like this could be the year.
That offense looks scary.
It's scary, man.
And they just picked up that big receiver.
How many chips do we have to put on their shoulder before they just all, fall over? I don't know. I think they could obviously get to the Open Division, and I wouldn't be surprised one bit if they get there. Can they go all the way? It's going to come down to those other teams, how hot they are, because that's how what we saw was that Lincoln team was just riding a wave that could not be stopped, and it still came down to be very close. So obviously Carlsbad is the front runners, but like the Western League, just because they're the front runners doesn't mean that the other teams, are just going to lay over. There's some really great teams in this league.
I would say right now, top to bottom, Avocado has the edge.
Yeah,
but as far as top heavy, you got to give it to the Western League.
Yeah, I think so as well. Just because I think Madison and Lincoln can both have that viable chance of being the best team in San Diego. But I think top to bottom, like you said, I think Avocado has grown to be just a little bit better than the Western League at this moment. Mm-hmm. So now, obviously, we look at a lot of the kids that are underrated, and there's plenty of kids that are underrated in this county. We could probably put one on every single team.
Right.
But we want to look at the guys who have flown completely under the radar, maybe, or maybe at most, nobody really
not getting the credit they deserve.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it might surprise a lot of people. Bowe, would you like to start off first, who is really someone that you think could surprise a lot of people this year?
Yeah, Jamil Kassab is one of those guys that is mentioned through the football community, but not a lot of people are talking about him, mainly because he comes from Ramona, a program that's kind of further out from majority of the teams. But Ramona is a program that were second place in D3 and D2 in the last 2 years, losing to eventual state champions. So good programs. Coach Baldwin is doing an exceptional job. But this guy, Kassab, was athletic, impact plays on offense and defense, was tied second in the county with 8 interceptions, 31 receptions for 534 yards, and added 4 tackles along the way. So he's going to be a two-way guy that's going to be mentioned, I feel, down the stretch. And one guy that's not talked about a lot is Xavier Williams. He goes to Hoover. He's a dual sport athlete. I actually played with his dad at Chula Vista, who was a great football player. Xavier had 16 receptions, averaged 22 yards per catch in his first ever football season. He also added 3 touchdowns as well. And now they have a gunslinger out there at Hoover in Christian Noriega. So they have a quarterback that can get Xavier Williams the ball. And when you put up stats like that in your first football year ever, good things to come for the senior this year. And a freshman phenom I'm going to mention reminds me of a Mike Williams type of receiver. Big body on the outside, can stretch the field when he's one-on-one, and that is none other than freshman Delonte Williams out of Mount Miguel. You talk about a Tampa Bay type of team. Chris Godwin reminds me of a Jeremiah Castillo, and a Matthew Barton reminds me a little bit of TB12. And we talk about a team and a program that likes to throw the ball. We know Coach V is going to throw the ball all over the field. Brady led the league in total pass attempts, and I think Barton has a chance to do that this year. So Delonte Williams and Jeremiah Castillo both can have 1,000 receiving yards on the season. We talk about Castillo all the time, but Delonte Williams is a big body, big receiver. We talk about 50-50 balls. It's more like 75-25 for him. I see double-digit touchdowns and at least 700 receiving yards. So Delonte Williams is a guy we're going to be talking about a lot at Mount Miguel.
See, I like that of someone who, in his system, might just get so many yards because they're always going to be throwing the ball. This player, I don't know if his system might fit that. Who knows? Maybe they go back to their state title winning ways where they're a bit more balanced and they break away from a little bit more of the wing tee. But when I went to go watch my Cathedral Catholic Dons in 7-on-7, I caught him about 4 or 5 times. The guy who stood out the most every time was this kid, Charlie Apst. He gets open. He's always making plays. He's got great hands, great route running, and he's kind of a physical body. I like what I see from this kid, Charlie Apps. And if they do go to more of a spread kind of, look when it comes to how they kind of did with Charlie Meyer and Rex Haynes, while they also had Lucky Sutton, he could be one that we hear his name every Friday night on the PPR because he's in the end zone scoring again. I'm telling you right now, if you guys haven't seen Charlie Apps, be ready for him because he's going to be making a lot of plays this year for the Dons. Another player now I want to talk about, if we go on the defensive side of the ball, we talk about big edge rushers. We talk about guys who can get at the quarterback, but really are just kind of nasty getting at the ball. That's Nathan Terzoli from Point Loma. This kid, 6'2", 210, plays edge rusher, plays a little bit tight end, he's a long snapper as well. What stands out to me is the high motor and the pursuit. He never gives up on a play. If you watch his tape, it's always I love how he sacks the guy. I love his handwork on the line, but it's when he notices that it's a screen and how quick he gets out to go blow up the running back or wide receiver. That's what stands out to me the most. I think he can have a huge season this year. 12.5 sacks, 61 total tackles, 20.5 of those were for loss last year. Got an interception as well. So I got to love that when the big guys on the line get an interception. But I think Terzoli could have a potential to be on maybe the Defensive Player of the Year situation when it comes to the Silver Pigskin Gala. He has all of that in his caliber. I like what I see from Terzoli. I think he has a huge year for the Pointers. Now, if we want to talk about Silver Pigskin candidates, this kid, and no disrespect to him, probably has a less than 1% chance. And that's probably even being generous. Because I don't know if kickers can get on the Silver Pigskin podium, but if there ever was one, I'm going to get on my soapbox right now for Trey Coleman from Del Norte.
Okay.
This kid has a golden leg. I've been able to see him at all these camps. He stands out above everyone. Almost a similar situation to Julian Sayin. Like, I love the quarterbacks in our county. I love going to the Super 7 camps and 7-on-7 and seeing all these guys play. But then when Julian Sayin steps in, it's just a little bit crisper, a little bit farther, and a little bit better. That is the same reaction I get with Trey Coleman when it comes to these kicking camps. At the Jason Myers camp, at the New Gen kicking camp, all these guys are booting the hell out of the ball. He comes up there, and it's another 10 yards every time. He is phenomenal. At the Polynesian Bowl, he was good from 60, 62, 65, and 66. Let me say that one more time.
Yeah.
He's hitting it from 66, Bo.
What side of the logo is that
if
on?
we're sitting in the stands and you're looking at the field, pick whatever goalpost you want. He's at the opposite end of the logo. He's that good. And when you have one of those guys that is the superlative, I don't care what position he's at, he can be a dominator in the game. And how many more wins can he impact for Del Norte? How many more games can he get them 3 points instead of punts? I think he has a chance to be a huge impact for the Del Norte Nighthawks this season. If you don't know about Trey Coleman, you will find out soon enough. That's all I have to say. I think he's extremely underrated because kickers are people too.
Yes, they are, Chase. You're right. And you are a person also.
Well, as we're winding it down now, let's talk about some of your favorite football memories, or at least one that stands out to you as we get closer now.
Yeah, we're, as you mentioned, 11 days away. One thing that I always will remember and never forget is just the energy buildup walking out the tunnel when they're calling your name out for starting lineups. It's just an excitement under the lights with the crowd cheering your name. There's just something about it.
Nothing better.
Yeah, there really isn't. It's even better than scoring a touchdown, hitting a home run.
Better, it's even better on rivalry games.
yeah.
When you walk out, the crowd's going crazy. Somewhat for me is the pregame little huddle that we had for the defensive side of the ball. All the guys making us go crazy. The hype, but nothing beats when one of your players, especially for me, defense, nothing beats when one of your guys makes an interception or gets the fumble and they run off the field and you get to go crazy with them as they run to you.
Yeah.
Actually got a concussion one way doing that. My buddy Matt Fornaco ran off the field after a huge long drive to win the touchdown, came off and we always headbutted and he headbutted me and I saw Tweety Birds.
Saw stars.
So yeah, I cannot wait for football to get back. 11 days away. Stay tuned for the PPR podcast number 111 with Brady Palmer tomorrow. But for now, that'll do it for me and Bowe.